My wife ditched me 3 months before our jubilee because her dad told her I wasn't better enough. You're nothing without my daughter, he can do so much better, he told. I just chuckled and left. Now she texted me 25 times in a day, sniffling and begging me to take back him broke, dejected daughter. And what followed changed everything. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, and how it all came back around, do me a small favor. Hit subscribe, drop a comment about where you're watching from, and help this story reach people who might need to hear it. Now let me take you back to how this all started. I'm Ethan Caldwell. I'm 35 now, but when this happened, I still thought stability, loyalty, and patience were enough to build a life. Rachel and I met almost 6 years ago in Ashford, Oregon. Nothing dramatic. We were both volunteering at a local fundraiser, me helping with logistics, her working registration. She smiled at me like she already knew me, like we'd crossed paths before. We hadn't, but from that night on, it felt like we were meant to. Rachel was warm, ambitious, and deeply tied to her family. Especially her father, Victor Monroe. I noticed that early on. Victor wasn't loud or explosive. He didn't have to be. He spoke softly, carefully, like every sentence was calculated to land exactly where it hurt most. At first, I thought he was just reserved. When Rachel introduced me to her parents, Victor shook my hand and asked what I did for a living. I told him I worked in analytics at a mid-sized tech firm. He nodded, asked what my long-term goals were, whether I saw myself moving upward. I laughed it off, said I liked building things slowly, sustainably. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Rachel warned me later that her dad had high standards and could be intense about success and image. I didn't think much of it. I loved her, and she loved me. That was enough, or so I thought. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony. Nothing flashy. Just close friends, some family, and a quiet confidence that we were choosing each other, not performing for anyone else. For a while, it worked. We moved into Riverstone Flats, a modest but comfortable apartment. We built routines, Sunday morning coffee, late night takeout, long walks when we couldn't sleep. But Victor never stopped hovering. He'd call Rachel to ask how I was doing at work. Not how I was feeling. Not whether I was happy. Always about progress. Promotions. Salary. Trajectory, as he liked to say. At first, Rachel brushed it off. That's just how he is, she'd tell me. He worries. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. About a year before our jubilee, things started shifting. Subtle at first. Rachel became quieter when we talked about the future. When I mentioned possibly staying at my company longer instead of jumping ship for a higher paying but unstable offer, she hesitated. Said her dad thought I was playing it too safe. Then Victor started inviting Rachel out without me. Dinners, weekends, even a short trip with her parents. I wasn't excluded outright, but I wasn't exactly welcomed either. If I came up in conversation, Victor would sigh and say things like, "Ethan's a good man, but good isn't always enough." 3 months before our jubilee, Rachel asked if we could talk. That sentence alone made my stomach drop. We sat on opposite ends of the couch in our living room, the same place we'd laughed and planned and argued and made up for years. She didn't cry. That scared me more than anything. She said her father was worried about her future. About our future. He thought I wasn't ambitious enough, not established enough, not the kind of man who could match her potential. She repeated his words carefully, like she was afraid of cutting herself on them. Then she said something I'll never forget. He thinks I'm settling. I waited for her to defend us. To say she disagreed. To say she chose me anyway. She didn't. She said she needed space. That maybe we'd rushed into marriage. That maybe love wasn't enough if our paths were misaligned. She told me her dad believed she'd regret staying with me. And then she told me she was leaving. 3 months before our jubilee. Not because she didn't love me, she said, but because she didn't want to disappoint her father. Victor didn't even have the decency to say it to my face. But his words came through her mouth just fine. "You're nothing without my daughter," he'd apparently told her. "I can help her do so much better." When Rachel finished talking, I surprised myself. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so painfully clear. Years of quiet judgment, subtle digs, measured disapproval, all of it finally out in the open. I told her I wasn't going to fight her father for permission to exist in my own marriage. I told her if she believed his version of my worth, then she'd already made her choice. She packed a bag that night and went to her parents' place. I didn't beg. I didn't shout. I didn't collapse. I sat alone on our couch and felt something shift inside me, not into anger, but into resolve. If I was nothing without her, then I was about to find out exactly what that nothing could build on its own. That was the last night we lived as husband and wife. And it was the first night of a life none of them saw coming. After Rachel left, the apartment felt unnaturally quiet. Not peaceful, just empty in a way that made every sound echo too loudly. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking wall clock, even my own breathing felt intrusive. That first night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting when she told me she was leaving, replaying every word, every pause, every moment where I'd expected her to choose us and she hadn't. By morning, reality settled in. She wasn't coming back. Not to talk. Not to reconsider. Not to fight for anything. She'd already handed the steering wheel of her life to her father, and I was just collateral damage. I took the day off work, not because I was falling apart, but because I knew if I didn't slow down for a moment, everything would hit me all at once. I made coffee I barely touched and walked through the apartment, opening drawers, closets, cabinets. Rachel hadn't taken much, just clothes, personal items, a few framed photos. The rest of our shared life was still there, suspended in place like a paused movie. By noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "I'm staying with my parents for now. I think it's best we give each other space." No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just distance, wrapped in polite language. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Jordan Blake, my best friend since college. He answered on the second ring. "She left, didn't she?" he said. I don't know how he knew. Maybe he heard it in my silence. "Yeah," I said. 3 months before our jubilee. There was a pause, then, "I'm coming over." Jordan didn't ask questions when he arrived. He didn't offer clichés or empty encouragement. He ordered food, opened a beer, and sat next to me on the floor because the couch felt too big for one person. That night, for the first time since Rachel walked out, I slept, on sheer exhaustion alone. The next few weeks were brutal in a quiet, grinding way. Rachel didn't come back to get the rest of her things. She sent a text asking if I could box them up so her brother, Lucas, could pick them up later. That hurt more than I expected. Not even a face-to-face goodbye. Just logistics. I packed everything carefully anyway. Folded her clothes. Wrapped fragile items. Labeled boxes. It felt like performing the final duties of a marriage that had already been pronounced dead. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects at Vertex Systems Analytics, arriving early, staying late. My manager, David Porter, noticed immediately. He didn't pry. He just started trusting me with more responsibility, bigger accounts, cross-department coordination, long-term planning. Being needed helped. Being respected helped more. About a month after Rachel left, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Victor Monroe had been helping her reset. That meant networking dinners, introductions, and pointed conversations about how she'd nearly made a mistake with me. Apparently, Victor had been telling anyone who would listen that Rachel had escaped a limiting situation. I found that out accidentally, from a coworker whose wife attended the same charity board as Victor. I listened without reacting, thanked him for the heads up, and went back to my desk. Inside, something hardened. Rachel eventually came by the apartment while I was at work to pick up the last of her things. She left her key on the counter. No note. No goodbye. 2 months passed. That's when the silence broke. It started with a text. Then another. Then another. "Rachel. Hey, can we talk? I've been thinking a lot." I didn't handle things well. I read them without responding. Then the tone shifted. "I'm not doing great. Dad was wrong about some things. I miss what we had." 25 messages in one day. Some rambling. Some apologetic. Some desperate. I still didn't respond. A few days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again. Then again. Voicemail. Her voice was different, smaller, shaky. "Ethan, please. I just need to talk. Things aren't how I thought they'd be." I deleted the voicemail. What Rachel didn't know, what Victor hadn't anticipated, was that without me quietly supporting everything behind the scenes, things in her life started unraveling fast. The better future her father promised didn't materialize. The job opportunity he'd pushed her toward fell through. The connections dried up once they realized Rachel wasn't a trophy, just a person. And Victor? He hated losing control. That's when the messages escalated. Rachel started texting late at night. Early mornings. Long paragraphs about regret, about pressure, about how she hadn't realized how much I held things together. She said her father had been wrong to interfere. That she should have stood up for us. What she never said was, "I'm sorry." Then Victor himself reached out. From a number I didn't recognize. "Ethan, this is Victor. We need to talk. Rachel isn't doing well." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying with just 3 words. "Not my responsibility." That didn't stop him. Calls. Missed calls. Emails I didn't open. Messages framed as concern but dripping with entitlement. He spoke as if my role in Rachel's life was a switch he could flip back on now that things weren't working out the way he'd planned. He was wrong. Meanwhile, my life, quietly, steadily, kept moving forward. Jordan convinced me to look at new apartments. Said the old place was full of ghosts. He was right. I found a one-bedroom at Pinecrest Lofts. Smaller, brighter, closer to work. I signed the lease without hesitation. Moving out felt like shedding a skin. Around that time, I met Maya Reynolds. No drama. No whirlwind. We were introduced through work. She consulted on a project for a few weeks. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into conversation that didn't feel like work anymore. I didn't tell her everything at once. Just enough. She listened without judgment, without trying to rewrite the story in her favor. She didn't ask me to be anything other than honest. That was new. One evening, after a long day, I checked my phone and saw 25 missed texts from Rachel. 25 in one day. The last one read, "Please. I know I messed up. I'll do anything. Dad was wrong. I was wrong. Just don't shut me out." I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindication. I felt calm. Because the man she walked away from, the man her father dismissed as nothing, was standing on his own 2 feet, building a life that didn't need their approval. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. It was just the moment before everything finally came into the light. The messages didn't stop. They changed shape. At first, it was regret. Then confusion. Then fear. She started texting about memories, random, insignificant moments she suddenly treated like sacred ground. The time we got lost driving to the coast. The night the power went out and we ate cereal by candlelight. The dumb inside jokes we used to repeat until we were laughing for no reason. It was like she was flipping through our entire relationship, trying to find the exact page where she could crawl back in. I still didn't respond. Victor, on the other hand, escalated. He stopped pretending this was about Rachel's well-being and dropped the mask entirely. One evening after work, as I was leaving the parking garage at Vertex Systems, my phone rang again from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me this wasn't a voicemail situation. I answered. "Ethan," Victor said, his voice low, controlled. "We need to talk like adults." That alone told me everything. Victor didn't see me as an adult. He saw me as a variable that needed managing. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied. He sighed, the way men do when they think they're being patient. "Rachel's struggling. She made a mistake, and you know that. You were stable for her. Grounding. She needs that again." I actually laughed. Not loudly. Just a short breath through my nose. "So now I'm enough?" I asked. "Funny how that works. This isn't about pride," he snapped. "This is about responsibility." That was it. That was the line. I pulled my car over, put it in park, and said calmly, "You don't get to talk to me about responsibility. You interfered in a marriage. You undermined it. You told your daughter I was nothing. And now that your plan didn't work, you want me to clean up the mess." He went quiet. Then he said something that finally exposed him. "You don't understand the pressure she's under. The opportunities she lost by choosing you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I just said, "Lose my number." And I hung up. That night, I blocked every number connected to him. Rachel found another way. She showed up at Pinecrest Lofts. I wasn't expecting it. Maya was over, helping me unpack the last few boxes. We were standing in the kitchen, arguing lightly about where the coffee maker should go, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there she was. Rachel looked smaller. Thinner. Her confidence, the effortless certainty she used to carry, was gone. She was wearing a coat she'd borrowed from her mother, sleeves too long, hands clenched tight like she was bracing for impact. Her eyes flicked past me and landed on Maya. That was the moment it hit her. This wasn't a pause. This wasn't space. This was an ending. "I didn't know you'd moved on," she said, her voice barely steady. "I didn't know you'd left," I replied evenly. She flinched. Maya didn't say a word. She just looked at me, silently asking what I wanted to do. That alone told me more about her character than any grand speech could have. "Rachel," I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me, "this isn't appropriate." Tears welled up immediately. "I know I hurt you. I know I listened to him when I shouldn't have. But I didn't think he'd turn on me too. I didn't think everything would fall apart." There it was. Not love. Not remorse. Loss of control. "I thought you were strong," she continued. "I thought you'd understand. That you'd wait." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't ask me to wait. You told me I wasn't enough." Her breath hitched. "I didn't mean it like that." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You meant it enough to leave." She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Behind us, the door opened slightly. Maya stood there, not angry, not territorial. Just present. Rachel saw her and broke. "I don't know who I am without you," she sobbed. And for the first time since this started, I felt something close to pity. But pity isn't love. And it's not a reason to reopen a door you barely survived closing. "You're going to be okay," I told her. "But not with me." She looked at me like she wanted to argue. Like she wanted to demand something. But for once, she didn't have the upper hand. She left without another word. The next morning, my phone exploded. 25 texts. Again. This time from different numbers. Rachel. Victor. Helen. Even Lucas, her brother, asking if we could talk things out. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I focused on my life. Work took off in a way I hadn't expected. David pulled me aside one afternoon and told me a leadership role was opening up, one that required someone steady, someone trusted. He said my name had come up more than once. I accepted the interview. Maya and I took things slowly. No labels. No pressure. Just honesty. When I told her everything, really told her, she didn't try to save me from it. She just said, "I'm glad you chose yourself." 2 weeks later, I found out through mutual contacts that Victor's influence wasn't what it used to be. People talk when control cracks. His connections distanced themselves once Rachel's situation became messy instead of impressive. Rachel had moved back home. Temporarily, she said. Victor hated that word. That's when the calls turned desperate. Voicemails filled with sobbing. Texts promising therapy, boundaries, change. Promises that should have come before the damage, not after the consequences. The final message came late one night. "I get it now," Rachel wrote. "You were never the problem. I was. He was. I lost everything that mattered. Please don't make this permanent." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back one sentence. "It already is." I blocked the number. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. Because I finally understood something that took me far too long to learn. People who only value you when they're losing you never valued you at all. And the man they dismissed as nothing had quietly become someone they could no longer reach. Blocking Rachel should have been the end of it. I wanted it to be. I needed it to be. But when people are used to having access to you, silence feels like an insult. And insults, especially to people like Victor, don't go unanswered. I found out how far he was willing to go about a week later. It started at work. I was in a meeting when David's assistant knocked and quietly asked if I could step out. That never happened unless something was wrong. When I got into the hallway, David was waiting, arms crossed, expression tight but controlled. "There's someone downstairs asking for you," he said. I didn't need to ask who. "I already told her this wasn't appropriate," I said. David nodded. "She says it's urgent. And she's emotional." That alone was humiliating. Not because I was ashamed, but because this was my workplace. The one place that had stayed clean, professional, untouched by the wreckage of my personal life. I took a breath. "I'll handle it." Rachel was standing in the lobby near the reception desk. Her hair was pulled back hastily, eyes red, hands clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. A few people were pretending not to stare. They weren't fooling anyone. When she saw me, relief washed over her face so fast it almost knocked her off balance. "Ethan," she said, stepping toward me. I didn't know where else to go. I stopped a few feet away. "You can't be here." "I just need 5 minutes," she pleaded. "Please. I won't make a scene." She already had. I lowered my voice. "You need to leave. Now." Her eyes filled again. "I lost my job. Dad's furious. He says I embarrassed him. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." And there it was again. Not what she'd done. Not how she'd hurt me. Just the fallout. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I said honestly. "But this ends today." She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Like she was seeing a version of me she'd never expected to exist. "You're being cold," she whispered. I met her eyes. "No. I'm being clear." Security didn't have to get involved. She left on her own, shoulders shaking, dignity hanging by a thread. I stood there until the lobby doors closed behind her, then turned and walked back upstairs without looking back. David didn't ask questions. He just said, "If this happens again, let me know. We'll handle it." That mattered more than he probably realized. That night, Victor tried again. Different number. Different tactic. This time, it was an email. Long, carefully written. Full of phrases like miscommunication, family pressure, and doing what's best. He framed himself as a concerned father who'd only wanted security for his daughter. He never once acknowledged what he'd said about me. Never apologized. Just reframed the past like it was a misunderstanding between equals. The final paragraph made my jaw tighten. "I believe there's still a path forward here. Rachel needs stability. You were always good at providing that. Needs. Not wants. Needs. Like I was a utility. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to a folder I labeled closed. Maya noticed the shift in me that week. Not in a worried way. In a curious one. "You're lighter," she said one evening as we cooked dinner together. "Like something finally stopped pulling at you." I thought about that for a moment. "Yeah," I said. It did. A few days later, Lucas reached out again. He was the only one I hadn't blocked, mostly because he'd never crossed a line. "I'm not asking you to fix anything," he said over coffee. "I just want you to know. I see it now. I always knew Dad was controlling, but I didn't realize how much he'd twisted things." I appreciated his honesty. Truly. But honesty doesn't undo damage. "I'm not angry at you," I told him. "But I'm done being part of their narrative." He nodded. "That's fair." And that was it. No guilt. No pressure. Just acceptance. Then came the breaking point. Victor showed up at Pinecrest Lofts. Not Rachel. Him. I wasn't home when it happened. Maya was. She called me, voice calm but tight. "There's an older man here asking for you," she said. "He says he's your former father-in-law." My stomach dropped. "I'm on my way," I said. By the time I got there, Victor was pacing the courtyard like he owned it. When he saw me, he straightened, jaw set, ready for a confrontation he clearly believed he deserved. "Good," he said. "We need to talk." "No," I replied. "You need to leave." He scoffed. "You can't just cut us out like this. You were family." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so Maya, and anyone else nearby, wouldn't have to hear this. "You made it clear I wasn't good enough to be family," I said. "You don't get to rewrite that now." His face hardened. "You're punishing my daughter to prove a point." "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting myself." He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Something shifted in his expression, anger giving way to panic. "She's falling apart," he said. "She listens to you. You always had influence over her." I laughed then. "Not out of cruelty. Out of disbelief." "You don't get to blame me for what you taught her," I said. "You raised her to believe worth comes from approval. From status. From you?" Silence stretched between us. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "This conversation is over," I said clearly. "If you or anyone in your family contacts me again, shows up at my home or my workplace, I'll treat it as harassment. Do you understand?" Victor stared at the phone, then at me. Slowly, he nodded. He left without another word. That was the last time I saw him. The aftermath was quiet. Blessedly quiet. Rachel stopped trying. Or maybe she ran out of ways to reach me. Either way, the noise faded. In the space that followed, my life expanded. I got the leadership role at work. More responsibility. More trust. Not because I chased it, but because I was ready for it. Maya and I stopped circling around what we were and just let it be what it was. Steady. Honest. Safe. One night, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker on, she asked me something simple. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Walking away?" I thought about Rachel. About Victor. About the man I was when I believed love meant endurance. "No," I said. "I regret staying quiet for so long." She smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder. That's when I realized something else. The worst thing Victor ever said about me wasn't that I was nothing without Rachel. It was that he believed I wouldn't survive without their permission. And he was wrong. The man they dismissed didn't fall apart. He walked away. And that choice changed everything. The months after Victor walked out of my life didn't explode into some dramatic victory montage. There were no fireworks, no sudden apologies, no poetic justice delivered overnight. What happened instead was quieter, and far more permanent. Life settled. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up braced for judgment. I wasn't replaying conversations in my head, wondering how I could have said something better, smarter, more impressive. I wasn't trying to earn a seat at a table where my worth was always conditional. I didn't realize how exhausting that had been until it stopped. Work became demanding in a way that felt earned instead of draining. The leadership role grew quickly, and with it came visibility I'd never chased before. I was presenting strategy to senior teams, mentoring newer hires, being asked for input instead of permission. No one cared where my parents came from, how impressive my connections were, or whether I fit some imaginary mold. They cared that I showed up, followed through, and treated people with respect. Funny how simple life becomes when you're judged on what you actually do. Maya moved in officially a few months later. Not with a big conversation or timeline, just one day when her lease ended and it made more sense for her boxes to come here than anywhere else. We took our time arranging things, deciding together where things belonged. There was no sense of territory, no silent power struggles. Just two people building something because they wanted to, not because anyone expected it. One evening, while we were unpacking the last box, she found the old Jubilee photo album Rachel had insisted on starting early. I'd forgotten it was still tucked away in the back of a closet. Maya held it up. "Do you want to keep this?" I took it from her and flipped through the empty pages. Dates penciled in. Ideas written in Rachel's handwriting. Plans that never happened. "No," I said gently. "But I don't need to destroy it either." I closed it and slid it into the recycling bin. That was the moment I knew I was done. Not angry done. Finished done. The past didn't haunt me anymore. It just existed somewhere behind me. About 6 months later, Lucas reached out again. This time, not cautiously. Not apologetically. Just honest. "Rachel's moving," he wrote. "Different state. Dad's furious. Mom's exhausted. I figured you should know, not because you owe anything, but because it might explain the silence." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't feel relief. Or satisfaction. Or vindication. I felt nothing. "Thanks for letting me know," I replied. "I hope she finds what she's looking for." And I meant it. That surprised me more than anything else. A few weeks after that, I ran into someone I hadn't seen since before the split, an old mutual friend who'd been at our wedding. We exchanged small talk, caught up awkwardly, and then she hesitated before saying, "I heard what happened. With Rachel and her dad." I waited. I just wanted to say, "I wish I'd known how bad it was," she said. "You always looked so steady. I think people assumed you didn't need support." That sentence hit harder than Victor ever had. Because that was the truth. I'd trained everyone, including myself, to believe that being strong meant being silent. "I needed it," I said. "I just didn't know how to ask." She nodded like she understood more than she could say. That conversation followed me home. That night, I told Maya about it. About how easy it is to disappear when people decide you'll always be fine. She listened, then said something that stayed with me. "Strength doesn't mean standing alone," she said. "It means knowing when you don't have to." That became something like a quiet rule for my life. I started reaching out more. Not dramatically. Just honestly. Checking in with friends. Saying when work was heavy. Letting people show up for me the way I'd always shown up for them. And the strange thing was, nothing fell apart. If anything, things grew stronger. Nearly a year after the breakup, my phone buzzed with a notification I didn't expect. A message from Rachel. Not a call. Not a long explanation. Just a short text. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see what I lost. I hope you're happy." I stared at the screen, heart steady, breathing calm. A year ago, that message would have shattered me. I would have reread it 100 times, searching for hidden meaning. Wondered if it was an opening. A regret. A chance. Now? It was just words. I replied. "I wish you peace." I blocked the number afterward, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Some chapters don't need epilogues. The last thing I ever heard about Victor came indirectly. A former colleague mentioned seeing him at an event, quieter than before, more reserved. Someone who'd lost control of the narrative he'd spent his life curating. It didn't make me smile. It didn't make me sad. It just confirmed something I'd already learned. People who build their identity on authority don't know who they are when no one listens anymore. As for me, I kept building. Maya and I didn't rush milestones. We traveled. Took a small anniversary trip, not to prove anything, just because we wanted to. No curated photos. No performances. Just laughter, sunburns, bad coffee, and memories that belonged to us alone. One night, sitting by the ocean, she asked me if I'd ever want to remarry. I thought about it carefully. "Yes," I said. "But only if it feels like this. Equal. Quiet. Chosen." She smiled. "Good. Because that's the only version I believe in." That was the moment I understood the full irony of it all. Victor had told Rachel I wasn't better enough. He thought value was measured by status, by trajectory, by what could be shown off. But the life I built without their approval? It was richer than anything they ever offered. Not louder. Not shinier. Just real. And the man they dismissed? He didn't crumble. He didn't beg. He didn't chase validation. He walked away, built something solid, and never looked back. That's the part they never planned for. And that's why, in the end, I won. Before you go, if this story resonated with you in any way, take a second to support the channel. Subscribe for more real-life stories like this, tap the like button so it reaches others who might need it, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories get heard.